Explain like I'm five. Why do propeller planes still exist? With most commercial aircrafts using turbofan engines, which makes it faster. Why do a portion of military planes still uses propeller engines? I think the C-130 is the best example. With most commercial aircrafts using turbofan engines, which makes it faster. Because speed isn't the only thing to optimize for. Turboprops are considerably more efficient at slow speeds and lower altitudes. This also makes them capable of taking off from shorter runways. Also, it's considerably safer to take off from a dirt runway with a turboprop than a turbofan, because you don't have to worry as much about the engine ingesting rocks or whatever. Building off of this, when you need to throw things out of the airplane, being able to do it at a slower speed is generally better for the thing you're throwing out of it. So if you want to engage in a dated and obsolete method of moving people from one place through the air to a battlefield, you want most of those people intact when they get there. Love you throwing shade at the airborne there. Lol. For most military purposes, propeller planes are used because they require a shorter runway to take off. C-130s deliver cargo all over the world. They don't always have the luxury of fully built modern runways. You sometimes want a plane that can fly slower and lower and more fuel efficiently and cheaper, great for training, surveillance, austere situations, firing platforms, parachute launch. Those propeller aircraft still have jet engines. They are just connected to a propeller instead of a ducted fan. That gives them different trade-offs. Propellers, turboprops, are slower but have better efficiency. A new type of engine we might see in the next decade or so is an unducted fan engine like the CFM Rise, which aims to combine the efficiency of a turboprop with the speed of a turbofan. Explain like I'm five. In speedcubing, if the puzzles are randomly generated, how do they ensure that record times are performed on the same level of difficulty? If the previous record was 5 seconds and the newest record is 4 seconds, how would it be fair if one competitor received an easier combination to solve? Every combination, if sufficiently scrambled, can be solved in 19 moves. Scrambling sequence is randomly generated. This ensures random equal chance to everyone. In order to get world record, you need to solve it several times and your time is averaged. There is also single world record. The 19, I think it's actually 20, moves do not apply here, because humans just can't think like that so fast. So for the single world record, the solver must be extremely good and have a very lucky scramble so that they can solve the cube very efficiently with their method. Also, the 20 moves may not be fast because you may have to do a bunch of suboptimal moves that don't flow together in the fingers. That's not really the case. It's more that you need to know exactly those 20 moves. Also, 20 is the maximum number, not minimum. The issue is figuring out that exact count of moves for the solve. The people at the record just know the repertoire of different algorithms and execute. They are not able to determine the 20-move solution. I'm relatively new to cubing, but my understanding is that at any given speed cubing competition, each competitor competing in a given category receives the exact same scramble, and the scramble is generated by a computer algorithm that helps ensure that it's not too easy. So when they're directly competing against each other, it is fair. Nobody gets an easier scramble. When it comes to world records, yes, it's possible that the very best single solve world record might have had an easier scramble. I'm not knowledgeable enough to know if it actually was. But cubers typically pay more attention to average solve time over a set number of solves, like 12 solves, in order to help even out the effect of a particularly fast or slow solve. The world record solve times are all lucky scrambles, where multiple 1 in 12, 1 in 20, or whatever the numbers are, all line up to happen at the same time. When these line up, the solver has multiple steps they simply don't have to do that are required if they don't. The world records are in the 4-second range, but these top solvers still average in the 6 to 7-second range. Someone may correct me with more accurate numbers and times. Explain like I'm five. Why is it better to buy a home with a mortgage even if you can buy it off in full? Depends on your interest rate. If it's low enough, you can beat it with investments. If your interest rate is high, then the less debt the better. My interest rate is 3.5%. Long-term stock gains would be taxed at 15% and no state tax for me. So to beat it, I just need to average better than 4% each year, which for the S&P 500 is very easy over the long run. Oh, if you itemize your tax deductions, then that also would be a factor. To clarify on the itemization of tax deductions in the US and possibly elsewhere, your mortgage interest payments can be deducted, lowering your effective tax rate. In Canada, mortgage interest is only tax deductible if the property is an investment property that generates rental income for you. Depends on your interest rate, the time you plan to hold on to the home, and what you could do with the cash if you don't spend it on a house. Let's take an easy example. A 100K house. You have 100K plus in cash you could use to purchase the house outright. You plan to hold the house for 5 to 10 years. So if you spend 100K on the house, that's that. All 100K is tied up in the house. If you sell in 5 to 10 years for 150K, you made $50 on a 100K investment. 50%, that's not bad. But if you put down $20 and financed 80K when you first bought, then when you sold, you made $50 on a 20K investment, a 250% return. This ignores your borrowing costs for the moment, but even if you assume you pay 20K in borrowing costs, you still end up making $30 on a 20K investment, or a 150% return. You can calculate all of this precisely based on particular rates and terms, but these examples should give you an idea of why it's often a good idea to use other people's money when paying for your stuff that you can resell later. It's called leverage, and it's an extremely powerful tool for taking modest returns and making them much higher. There's risk with leverage, of course, but if you have the cash at the outset, your risk is small so long as you don't lose it. Leaving that aside, if you can borrow money for significantly less than what you can, more or less, safely earn on it, it's a good idea to borrow that money as long as you actually invest the cash you didn't need to use on the house. You need to know your likely rate of return and what your taxes will look like to determine how valuable this approach is. But generally speaking, the lower your interest rate, the more attractive this option becomes. It isn't always necessarily true, but it just has to do with the mortgage interest rate versus the possible rate of return you could make on investing your money. Like say, you go to buy a house, and you have the option for taking a $100,000 mortgage and investing your money, or just paying for the house in full. If you decide to pay for the house in full, great, you won't have to pay any interest anywhere, so you are saving that potential extra money spent. But let's say you take out the 100K mortgage at a 7% interest rate and invest your 100K cash. At the end of the year, you will now have a total mortgage of 107K because of the 7% interest accrued. But if your investments went up by 8%, then your investment account now has 108K in it. Meaning, even though you're paying interest, you still made $1,000 by just investing your money. This becomes doubly true when interest rates are low, like 5% or lower, because that's easier for investments to beat. Opportunity cost is the phrase you're looking for. As in, if I spend money on a home, I give up using that money somewhere else. Mostly depends on the cost of money, interest rates, and the alternative return. Example, my mortgage is very low rate, 2.6%. I spend $400 a month, 100K borrow on principal plus interest, about 5K a year. If I had $100 and could get 5% on a CD, the interest generated would pay for my mortgage without the loss of principal. Or I could invest in the market and get 7% while only paying 2% interest. Today's mortgage rates make these options less viable. Explain like I'm 5. Why is Spain's unemployment rate so high? Spain's unemployment rate has been significantly higher than the rest of the EU for decades. Recently it has dropped down to 11 to 12%, but it has also had long stints of being 20% plus over the past 2 decades. Spain seems like it has a great geographical position, stable government, educated population with good social cohesion. So why is the unemployment rate so eye-poppingly high? There is a significant amount of 1. Seasonal work. Some people work 4 months in summer, live the rest of the year with that. 2. Unregistered work. Much of this summer work is done illegally, unregistered, so there is people who work but are unemployed for statistics purposes. Honestly, working only 4 months, but could feed you for the rest of the year. Sounds lovely. Most likely, they are working on different seasonal work. Correct. Your mountain guide in the summer is your snowboard instructor in the winter. Spain is a country that committed economic suicide by isolation since its civil war. Once it came out of its dictatorships, it chose short-term profit over long-term. This can be seen on how Spain focused its economy in what ended up being a big bubble in 2008. As well, its weather and natural beauty allowed the country to make a lot of easy money off food and tourism. Lately, it has become the most touristy country in the planet. This means that employment is highly seasonal and highly unregular, meaning lots of under-the-table payments that give a false sense of unemployment. In other words, Spain has invested in a lot of industries that provide diminishing returns and make the country compete with poorer and poorer countries. I lived in Spain as a teenager from 2001-2012 and can confirm pretty much all of this. Most of Spain's industry revolves around tourism, so job security is almost nil. The 2007 financial crisis was brutal. The place almost was like a ghost town. It especially sucked for me turning 18 because I had no interest in the tourism industry, so my only option was to do online freelance work. It might be different now, but there was also a lot of corruption going on there. Lots of red tape that you could conveniently bypass with a few extra euros, and lots of developments and projects that were getting greenlit in bad faith by uncles and brothers and cousins. Well, that's another episode of Explain Like I'm 5 in the books. I really appreciate all of you who made it this far into the video. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, it would really help the channel out a lot if you gave the video a thumbs up, subscribe, or leave a comment down below. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.